I'm about to tell you the cure to any addiction. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, right. But I know this worked because it worked for me. I've been trying to break my addiction to social media for years, and I've tried everything. Accountability apps, deleting accounts, and nothing ever worked. Until I discovered this simple method, and it's now been months without me struggling with social media again. This method is perfectly portrayed by the cautionary tale of Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel was the best and most popular quarterback in college football, with a super bright future in the NFL after getting drafted in the first round. Yet due to his addiction to drinking and partying, he was cut within 2 years, becoming one of the biggest draft busts in NFL history. Now, years later, he finally broke his addiction and is in a much better place for his physical and mental health. By the end of this video, I'll show you the exact method that both he and I used to overcome addiction. In his freshman year at Texas A&M University, Johnny Manziel led Texas A&M to beat powerhouse Alabama University, who had the most national championships in NCAA history. As soon as the game ended, he became an overnight sensation. He was mobbed by fans everywhere he went, signed endless autographs, and had to switch his classes online since he was so famous. Texas A&M kept winning and his fame kept growing larger. They threw mega parties on campus, and iconic celebrities flew him out to party with them. He was living it up every day, and despite showing up hungover to practices and games, he still played incredible. At the end of his freshman year, he made history by becoming the first freshman ever to win the Heisman Trophy. This launched him into a household name. If he partied hard the first year, he partied even harder the second year, especially once he figured out how to get around the NCAA rule against paying athletes and was able to get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars under the table, most of which went toward funding his party habits. With the off-the-field insanity his second year, he didn't play as well on the field, but it didn't matter because he was still one of the most famous athletes in the world. After his second season, since he wanted to get paid legally, he decided to turn pro. He was picked up by the Cleveland Browns in the first round of the NFL draft. The Cleveland Browns had a terrible team for decades and saw the talented Johnny Manziel as their savior. Yet while you would think that now as a professional he would take football more seriously, that wasn't the case. He continued to party and give minimal effort at practice, even admitting that he watched absolutely zero film. Following multiple terrible performances in his first few games of the season, it was obvious that he wasn't going to be Cleveland's savior. His parents and close friends begged him to stop throwing his life away, but he didn't listen. Then in his second season, after skipping a game because he was partying in Vegas, he was cut. The next few years were rocky, as he grew to regret the opportunities that he'd wasted and the relationships that he'd ruined, resulting in him attempting suicide. But after getting that close to death, he took accountability for the damage he'd done to his life and rekindled his relationship with his family, got rid of his vices, and started taking care of his mental health. Now he's in the best mental state of his life and giving back to the community. So how did he break his addiction?
Are you still drinking?
No. What did that get me? Where did that get me except out of the NFL?
When we have an addiction, although we logically want to stop indulging in it, when we're in the moment and we have to choose between our addiction, which makes us feel good, or choosing to face whatever unpleasant problem we're avoiding, we'll almost always choose the addiction. Because if you're only thinking about what will feel best in that moment, your addiction will win every time. Even if you're well aware of the bad that comes with it. If at that moment you don't have to deal with the consequence, or the consequence isn't necessarily guaranteed, it's very difficult to break that cycle. This is why addictions are so powerful and why it's so hard to break them. Johnny Manziel may have learned to overcome his addiction, but he learned the hard way. He discovered how to break the cycle after he had pushed himself to a near-death experience and felt the aftermath of wasting his talent and tarnishing the relationship with his friends and family.
She was crying and I saw the trickle-down effects of what I was doing.
But you can skip all this by asking yourself this one question: where will my addiction lead? In Johnny's case, he experienced where his addiction led.
Watching other guys that are doing what I want to be doing and I'm sitting on the couch being a loser.
To avoid this, in college, whenever he was thinking about partying, if he could have foreseen all of this happening, do you think he still would have partied as much as he did? So it's not about choosing an option that's less appealing than your addiction. In that moment, when you have two choices, you'll want to choose the option that's not your addiction, because you'll be horrified of where your addiction could lead. In my case, whenever I have the urge to indulge in social media, I ask myself, where will this lead? If I continue to be addicted to social media for another 10 years, I would be wasting thousands of hours, ruining my mental state and peace of mind, holding back my business, including this YouTube channel, and weakening the relationship with my family and friends. In the end, I would be throwing away so much that I actually cared about. For what? Just some fleeting pleasure? That's why whenever I ask myself that question, my urge to get on social media immediately goes away, and I'm able to easily do something else. So whatever your addiction is, ask yourself right now, if I continue with my addiction, where will it lead? And don't just think about the consequences that you may receive in the next few days or weeks. Be brutally honest with yourself and imagine what your life would actually look like a decade from now, or even in old age if you were still struggling with your addiction.
Quickly, it'll pass you by, and then you're sitting here 10 years later, watching other guys do what you love to do at one point.
Be specific about your visualization and even write down in detail what your life would look like. If you need inspiration, just look at what your addiction has taken away so far. Then double or triple that moving forward, because truthfully, it will only get worse. If you're honest with yourself, That image of you that's still a prisoner to your addiction should terrify you. Now, whenever you feel the urge to indulge in your addiction, ask yourself where it will lead and visualize the end result. This should instantly snap you back to reality and destroy your desire to indulge in it anymore. Also, the good news is, once you can stop yourself from indulging in your addiction the first few times, it will get easier and easier to avoid until you don't even think about it at all. So whatever addiction you have, the next time you have an urge, ask yourself, where will this lead long term? Visualize what your life would be like in a decade or more if you don't change. And that addictive habit that wants to look so tempting will now disgust you, and you'll never want to indulge in your addiction again.